So I don't think Sean or Ben need an introduction. Sean's the co-founder and CEO of Tinder, which I might not be the target population for, but working with a lot of single people, I think has become the de facto platform for people discovery, for making new connections. And I think learning about how you take a platform from incubation to insane scale, I think they've made over 11 billion connections to date, or maybe even more, is fascinating. And then Ben is the co-founder and CEO of Life on Air, which you may know in a former iteration as Meerkat. And they just launched a new product today called the House Party, which is a group video chat platform. So I'm personally excited to try it out. And let's bring them on stage and hear what they have to say. So Sean, Ben, thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Ben.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, yesterday we were on a call and you mentioned 12 billion connection made.
Yes. Yeah.
This is, after the call was like 30 minutes or something like that, but then I put the phone aside and I'm like 12 billion connection. That's got to be an awesome feeling to be able to build a product that brings people together in such a human connection. And was hoping that you can share like how does it feel and how the whole vision around Tinder came to be. If we can start with that.
Yeah. We started Tinder 4 years ago, and the idea was started because there was a lot of people that I wanted to meet. I would be at a restaurant or bar and I'd see someone interesting across the room, but I was always too shy to walk up to them. And I felt like my friends, no matter how cool they tried to act, sort of had the same problem. Everyone had the problem of making that initial introduction. But after that, I was like very comfortable building a connection. So what we realized is that the hardest part of making a new introduction is sort of the knowledge of whether the person you want to meet also wants to meet you. And that's what Tinder solves. And the people we meet are very important in our lives. I mean, even if it's a short relationship or a long relationship, it can change our lives and have a huge. I mean, I often tell people, what if you never met your wife or husband? Kind of like, what would your life be like? It's the people we meet, it fundamentally transforms us. So 4 years later, we've created 12 billion matches on the platform. We do about 30 million a day now. And yeah, it's awesome, because if you think about it, those are friendships, marriages, hookups, whatever, that would have never have existed were it not for Tinder. And those are people who would not know each other.
Yeah, it's so I'm with my partner for 4 years, and yesterday I had to text her and say like, hey Anna, I'm gonna sign up for Tinder now because I gotta check out everything that this platform is going through, because actually Sean is talking about taking the platform into a broader sense of social introductions.
Yep.
And there's actually in the feed of Tinder, which is quite addictive, I gotta say. There is a toggle in the top, and you can start seeing groups of people that are going out later together, and you can potentially tag along, or was wondering if you can share a little bit of how you look at the transition from the core offering. Like every social platform has this initial need that it answers, and then it kind of enhances behavior into that wedge.
Yep.
If it's Snapchat was the ephemeral messaging, mm-hmm. And then I think Facebook even before the news feed, and then it evolves and grows into something more broader than that. And I think it would be fascinating for us to hear how you guys look at it.
So Tinder Social, we started it because what we realized is our users would get a lot of matches, and when they're going out at night, they would text their matches just to ask like what they're doing, and A lot of the times I'd be matched with someone and you sort of tell the person to come out with their friends because it's a less intimidating experience to go out as a group. And when you're traveling especially, people use Tinder to figure out like where to go, what to do, and get like local recommendations. So this idea of going out and leveraging Tinder to make your night better was already a prominent use case on the platform. So we decided to sort of productize it and build something a little more specific to that use case. And I mean, it's taken off and it's doing very well. And you're right. I think the reason all great platforms sort of take off by solving an initial need, and then what you end up seeing is that there's all these adjacent use cases that sort of form. The unintended use cases. And on Tinder, what we see even today, if you go through people's bios and you sort of you mine through all that data, what you see is there's everything from I'm here for a certain particular type of relationship to I'm here because I want to make friends because I moved into a city, to I'm a trainer and I'm looking for clients. Like, so there's the broad types of introductions that people are trying to create out of Tinder, but we're sort of optimized for dating, and now we're starting to think about how can Tinder be a broader platform, and it's two-part. One is that's been our vision since day one. Never set out to build a dating product.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I still have not used, people don't believe me when I say this, I still have not used one other dating product other than Tinder just because the sign up is so complicated. And for any of you who've tried it, I find it so hard to use. But, the entire industry before Tinder was focused on helping people who weren't successful at sort of finding who weren't great at finding successful relationships to sort of meet the one. And that's predicated on this idea that these platforms know who the one is. Like eHarmony claims that they have all these algorithms and yada, yada, yada. Tinder, like, we're solving a different problem. We just want to make introductions. We don't pretend to know the complexities of love or human connectivity, but we have this vision that we just want to connect people around all kinds of different contexts, and we'll let them figure out the value of every connection. We just want to make it easier to get an introduction, which is sort of turning the industry and the problem upside down.
So when you think about this transition in the company from the core product offering, and the reason I think 200 people now working for Tinder in LA, yeah. Right?
200 in LA. And we just opened a Palo Alto office too. So 15 in Palo Alto too.
You told me yesterday you're going to double that in the next year. So when people come to work for Tinder, they are bought into a vision or this brand that they are familiar with. But then they come and join a product team and they're like, hey, yeah, the dating thing is working. Now we're working on some other things that are around social introductions. How do you guys go about it internally, and what is the leadership steps that you guys are taking in like fostering the new step of innovation?
It's so hard, and it's a new experience. Like, it's hard enough, as you know, and I know, like, it's hard enough to build something that, like, one thing that people like, yet alone another. And I think it's a fallacy to think that just because you have tens of millions of users, they'll sort of accept or use whatever you want. When you build a new product, you're sort of starting from scratch again. You have more data to guide you. You have an audience and behaviors that you can sort of capitalize on, but you're sort of building from scratch. And when we're building Tinder Social and then these other adjacent platforms, you run into all these cultural issues. Some of them are, there's people who are bought into the sort of core mission, and and are intimidated by this idea of adding social or groups to it because they think that doesn't belong on Tinder. It would be the equivalent of Twitter going from 140 characters to like 200 characters, and the controversy that would create internally, or Snapchat going from one-to-one to broadcast. And when we initially set out, what we realized is that collectively as a company, our vision is social introductions, and like we sort of let the team sort of feels that, knows that, and there are people who believe in the core mission, and they could just go build that and focus on that, and then there's sort of other siloed groups that are focusing on these other initiatives, and we treat them as startups. Like I always tell the product team, like, I'm a VC. I'm not in the idea business anymore. Like, you have to come to me with your ideas, and they have to align around our core values and what what our goals are for this year. But you come to me with your ideas, and I'll give you your seed capital, and we're gonna like define what the success metrics are and what product market fit looks like, and if you sort of reach that stage, then we'll give you further investment, and it's work for Tinder Social. Like this idea that you're building an MVP, whereas in the core product, when you launch something, you're sort of building it for scale, and you're building it thinking through all the adjacent use cases. In these new products that we're launching in a new tab or different parts of the ecosystem, you got to get the team in the mentality of, hey, let's not worry about what happens to this product if there's 1 million people using it every day. Let's first get 1 million people using it every day, and let's identify what that minimal viable product looks like, and let's be nimble and move around. And I think that's kind of hard when you're a big company and you have a set way of doing things. So I look at my job as to kind of get everyone aligned around one mission, but then make sure every team is set up for success, both culturally, and they have the resources that they need, but also that they're sort of able to break the rules when they need to, in order, if that's what it takes to sort of have their project succeed.
So how does the innovation is being discovered inside the company? Is there a group that is tasked on that, or any group do people come up with features? Do you A/B test it, or do people in Australia have different Tinder than they actually do?
I always tell like our die-hard users, I'm like, move to Australia. You'll get everything first. Australia.
Why is that?
We needed a sort of playground for new features, and Australia is sort of, I think there's a community of early adopters, and just traditionally we had a few employees there because it's where we did a lot of our grassroots marketing, and they're still there, so it's easy for us to launch things and sort of feel there's the quantitative reaction to the things that we do, and then the qualitative, and the qualitative is very important. Being able to experiment in an environment that you're intimately in tune with helps. About innovation, it's so hard. I think there's this desire as a big company to sort of say, we're going after initiative, we're allocating a certain amount of resources, we have a business plan, we know exactly what the core objectives are, yada, 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 yada. And you try to define success, and that's sort of how culturally you iterate. But in a startup, and when I look at innovation, I think of new initiatives as like they're almost like little startups. It's very, it could become counterintuitive to sort of set a very finite or strategic goal, when I think most great ideas are very iterative in nature, right? You like House Party came out of probably you're thinking about the space and everything. I know House Party is exploding. Congratulations, by the way. But I think everything is iterative in nature, and you have to foster an environment where you're able to have a thesis, and you have enough resources where you can experiment and learn and iterate, and that you don't call those things failures, right? Because it didn't hit sort of the success metrics. You call it learning. And you say, it's okay, we're gonna like give it a couple more cycles until we get it right. Whereas if you don't do that, then and you're very sort of metrics driven, it's like, okay, well, we launched this new product, and there's not 100 million people using it, therefore it's a failure. Versus if it was a startup and you had even a few 100,000 people using it, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this thing's a success. So it's all about perspective and sort of how you iterate and how you create that culture. And we try to do that.
So that's easy said, but I'm going to give an example, and I want to see. So when Facebook had just statuses and comments, they didn't have the like. There was a big internal debate whether likes are going to reduce the comments or to increase the comments, and eventually they decided to launch an experiment. But I think the change in thinking that saying adding this feature could be counter to something internally that we're working on, and people and managers that are measured by this KPI inside the company, and they think that this is going to take away from the attention or something that is already working. Do you have any example of like something like that happened in Tinder that you guys, let the innovation lead despite people's feeling?
The Facebook example is great. I'll give two more other examples, and I'll give it, because this is something I very relevant to what we're going through right now. MySpace, made money through impression-based advertising. And they had the ability way before Facebook, and they had the insight that they should not refresh the pages when you're going from image to image, but just sort of have an Ajax-like environment, and they didn't do that because they were afraid about cannibalizing their revenue stream. Now, the irony is, had they done that and minimized the inventory, they would have increased the CPM, and they actually would have made more money, ironically. But Facebook was sort of focused on the user experience and was willing to cannibalize its core business and disrupt itself, and there was many examples of that. Even the Facebook feed, right? The Facebook feed reduced the number of impressions, and it was just a solution to people going to different profiles and clicking refresh to see what's changed. So I think it's hard because you measure, like you said, you measure product leaders on certain KPIs, and if there's another project that's sort of killing, like that's sort of hurting another person's objective, it creates a lot of internal fighting. So Tinder Social had this exact issue, where we had this individual one-on-one matching concept, and then this group like friends-to-friends matching concept, and everyone was like, oh, this is going to be dilutive because there's a certain number of swipes you can do a day, and if we're diluting the one-on-one swipes for this other product, it'll fundamentally change our ecosystem. We don't know if this group thing is valuable. Will it drive real-world results, and yada, yada, yada. So what we did was, the right product decision was to separate it into two tabs, because it's a cleaner experience. But to compromise for that, we initially launched it in it all being in the same feed, where you would see individual group, individual group, individual group, and it was a shitty experience. And we weren't thinking about the user, we were thinking about sort of solving for KPIs, and which was one of the rare moments where that happened. I mean, usually we're so good about thinking about the users first. And we launched it, and first people did more swipes than less. So we increased the amount of time people were spending on Tinder, but users were confused. And then we separated into tabs, and the interesting thing is users spent even more time on Tinder than they did when it was in one feed, and it was a better user experience. So it takes a lot of courage to sort of make these changes, and I think what the leaders in the organization need to do is, I think, have maybe a broader definition of what an individual's success looks like, right? It's like when you're too siloed and there's no clear idea of what success looks like for the company, then people sort of get stuck in their own individual sort of, what are the KPIs they're driving? But if you're able to sort of draw a connection between, hey, if this product disrupts what you're doing, yes, it'll suck, but we're actually winning as a group, and your thing, you will evolve into something slightly different. If you're able to provide that clarity, I think it kind of reduces the internal friction. But I know many. I mean, Snapchat's another example. I mean, they going from one-to-one, which is a product that was working, ephemeral messaging, to broadcast, which was completely counter to their entire value proposition, which is this shit disappears, and now it's staying for 24 hours. I know it created a lot of internal fighting, but it was also a huge risk. Yeah. So I think, but you have to take those risks sometimes, and you're guided by what your users are doing. I think the answers are kind of right in front of you. Users sort of do these little things. You just have to interpret what they're trying to do and figure out if you can find products to do it better.
Yeah, on Snapchat, I remember a lot of people, before Story was out, a lot of people would go and just send to go one by one and click and send the snap to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they noticed that pattern, and that kind of fueled the thinking. So I want to go to the early days of Tinder. Kind of how it is to put a product in some campuses, and then it goes from 30,000 daily active to 600,000 daily active in, I think, 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. Three weeks, but.
What size of team there is there? How do you manage that? What's happening? Who's shouting at who?
Great question.
Who's dating who?
Zach, great question. So January 2013, I think it was 2013, we had 20,000 users. By January 30th, we don't even know what happened. We had 600,000. But by the way, 600,000 using the app it's an obsession. They're not putting the app down. And we had one client-side engineer, one back-end engineer.
Really?
Just one. Me on product and design and whatnot. And we had one designer too. And literally, I think, so the net result of this is you would open the app. At peak hours, you would wait probably 5 minutes to see inventory or people. Wow. Because literally our servers,
That's shorter than waiting to going to a club.
Yeah, it's shorter than going to a club, that's true. And we had this prototype code that we didn't even know this product would succeed. It was just, again, it was an idea, it was a hypothesis, and we threw it out there and it exploded, but we were still running on some prototype code that wasn't designed to scale. So every day I was like, this is gonna be our last. So I was just waiting for it, and what the strategy we took to get out of it is basically laid multiple bets. The engineer that Ryan Ogle, who's our CTO, he basically did not sleep. Oh, by the way, this is the best part. We had an engineer right before January, our sort of one of our founding engineers, and he quit. Right, it was just getting hard because it was too overwhelming. I mean, I don't blame him. It was very stressful. So he quit. So we had no engineer. Shit was crashing. We only had a client-side engineer. And because we were within this incubator, Tinder sort of was born within an incubator that I was running. There was another engineer on another project who sort of was like, I could fix it. And I'm like, okay, let's spend 30 minutes getting to know each other, because I think I've probably talked to you for 5 minutes when we were interviewing you. But I didn't know this guy, Ryan Ogle. I mean, I had faith in him, but he was cleaning the existing code by day, rewriting the entire infrastructure by night, probably did not sleep for 30 days. Meanwhile, I was talking to an offshore company to get them build another instance. Another sort of architect that I worked with in the past, I was having that person build another instance because we had no choice. And I'm like, one of these things are going to actually work. And Ryan was, in addition to doing that, Ryan was quarterbacking these other initiatives because there were, Ryan was an up-and-coming engineer, and I I knew nothing about building a large-scale platform. So part of the challenge was we had theories on how to make this thing scale, and Tinder's a unique problem. It's a unique computer science problem because you're doing some pretty crazy computations to deliver recommendations, but then every time you say no to someone, you're excluding people. So like, when people are saying no thousands of times a day, that list ends up becoming hard and the calculation is hard. So we didn't even know how to make this thing scale. So there's like 4 theories, and like all 4 were being built at the same time, and we were like, one of these are gonna work. And then it ended up at the one that Ryan was worked, and we threw away the other ones. So we had no choice. We just literally did whatever we could and made every bet we could to survive. And I think literally, I mean, by the time we deployed the sort of new architecture, the waiting times at peak hours got to like 45 minutes. So it was literally getting to the point where we probably would have just stopped growing and died, but we like got it right there. A funny story about the migration. So when we migrated over, the team played a prank on me, so they called me at 4 in the morning. I was like, I'll stay awake with you guys, whatever you do. Like, no, you go to sleep, we'll wake you up when it's done. Fell asleep at 2 a.m., they wake me up at 4 a.m., and they're like, okay, we have good news and we have bad news. Good news is we did the migration. It's looking like we can take the load and everything. Bad news is we lost all user data. And I'm like, okay, you mean, I'm like, oh, you mean it's in a backup and you're gonna migrate? Like, no, it's all gone. I think at that point, I literally felt like I was probably gonna have a heart attack and die. And then they told me they're joking, but shitty prank.
By the way, I only know all my friends are swiping right, just right all the time.
Yeah.
They brute force it like
Yeah.
completely. So I don't know what no you're talking about. There is a funny story about Israeli-Palestinian matching in the early
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, I'll tell.
Yeah, I think it would be fun.
So Tinder's in 196 countries. So like basically, I mean, you can go to a random country in Africa and there'll be users. In fact, there's users in Alaska. Literally, there's like, I think like probably like, I don't even know how many. Sorry, there's users in Antarctica. There's like maybe like 40 people and actually 2 scientists on like different parts of Antarctica swiped, matched, and got married from Tinder. Which is crazy. There's like literally 40 people who live on Antarctica. But we have users in Israel. We have, I think, 18% of the Israeli population uses Tinder actively.
Wow.
So it's a lot. And then there's a lot of the Palestinian population uses Israel. And what was happening was we kept hearing these stories. We kept getting like user feedback from both Israeli and Palestinian users who are like, can you let me put my religion or say that I'm Israeli? And we're like, why are they asking this? Doesn't make any sense. And once we investigated, we realized that Palestinian guys or girls were matching with Israeli guys or girls, and they were having these conversations because we all sort of look the same, and they would have these conversations. They would be like, okay, great, like let's meet up, and then they would realize that either one's on the one side of the border or the other, or they're sort of Palestinian and Jewish, and then it was almost like a Romeo and Juliet a thing. And so it was crazy because actually there were a lot of stories at that time in Israel that were saying that like Tinder's bringing peace to the Middle East because it's like creating more empathy because you match and you don't know. I mean, you look at the skin color and you look at everything and sort of everyone in the Middle East sort of looks the same, but you don't have the data to cut through. I mean, since then we have a lot more data, and this is back when we didn't even have bios. You weren't even allowed to put a bio on Tinder.
So I'm going to do one more last question before we move into questions from the audience. And it's something that I think it's very interesting to see companies that is doing social and then going to the point when they start transitioning into thinking about revenue. And I think Tinder in the past year is like going there, and it's something nice about the way you guys do it. every product decisions that is geared toward revenue is kind of the Tinder way.
Yeah.
And if you kind of, as our last part, kind
Yeah.
of guide us through the thinking around it and how you guys
Yep.
looking at revenue.
So we have 1 million paid users. So we have something we call Tinder Plus. It's doing incredibly well. And the philosophy we had, and this is very hard, particularly in the dating space, is basically the parameters we set for ourselves. We said, we're going to have a premium offering, but in the dating industry, most of that premium offering is at, like, most of the value you give to one person is at the cost of someone else's experience. Advertising is sort of, has a similar dynamic when not done well, which is like, the cost of putting an ad is sort of, there's something with my time, there's an interruption in what I want to do, and yada, yada, yada. So we said, we're going to make money, but we're not going to give, we're going to make money by offering things that our users want and are willing to pay for, but those things won't hurt someone else's users. So for example, an easy way we can make a lot of money, but we'll probably go out of business in 4 years, is we can charge people to force a match with another user. But that fundamentally violates our core principles, which is like, you have to swipe right, someone else has to swipe right, and then you guys can talk. So we had to look for things that our users wanted to do, but if you give them away to everyone, aren't valuable, but they're valuable in that they're scarce. And a great example is Super Like, which is, Super Like is sort of a button where I can let someone on Tinder know that they're extra special. They're not just a swipe right, they're a super swipe right. And everyone in the ecosystem gets one free a day. Yeah, swipe up. Everyone gets one free a day. And if you're a Tinder Plus member, you get 5 free a day. You can't get infinite, but you get 5 free a day. And it keeps it limited, scarce. It holds its value in that when someone receives a Super Like, they know that, you know, this person didn't just give it to everyone. So it keeps it as special. And it doesn't hurt anyone's experience. It doesn't force the match. It doesn't violate the person who's receiving the Super Like. They see otherwise everything they would see with just a person with a badge. And there's other, Passport is another example. Like with Tinder Plus, you can change your location. Let's say if you're traveling somewhere, you can change your location and make matches ahead of time. Well, if we gave it out for free to everyone, then everyone would be going to Israel, Paris, like just traveling but not really being there, and the quality of the ecosystem would just drop. So we make you pay for it. And by paying for it, it's increasing the odds that you're actually traveling, right? Because you probably wouldn't pay that much if you can't meet the person that you're going to match with in person. So we found that we could do this, and now we just launched Tinder Boost yesterday. And it's like you can get more exposure to the people around you who would have otherwise seen you. It's not to everyone, right? To everyone would be violating, but like I could click a button and for 10 minutes, if let's say the algorithm was going to show you in sequence to, let's say, 100,000 users around where we are right now, it would sort of cut you to the head of the line. It would give you just like a boost to the front of the line for 10 minutes. And that allows you to get those matches faster. You would still get those same matches, but just you would have to use Tinder for a lot longer, so it shortens the experience.
Cool. So we got a little bit of room for questions. Anyone has?
I got the mic here. Questions? Well, I can start if no one's asking, since I have the mic. I'll introduce myself. My name is Yasmin, and I'm from Icon. Sean, you started Tinder when you were in an incubator. I mean, people that are investors here know how important it is when you invest that the founder will have enough interest in the startup because it's a really difficult work. How is that different, and how did that play? Were there differences or something that you can talk about?
We were lucky in that it was Hatch Labs. It's hard to sort of call it, like there's different forms of incubators. What this was basically, great entrepreneurs can come in, we would give you money to go do whatever you want, but it was a safe environment to fail. You could fail without feeling a sense of guilt to investors or whatnot. And I came in and I was overseeing a bunch of initiatives, but then I had the idea for Tinder and we built Tinder. What's great about an incubator is that you can experiment. And like we said earlier, innovation sometimes is very iterative. Like you try a bunch of things, you learn, you use those learnings, you apply them again, and you find something that works. So the great thing about the incubator was that. The tough thing about an incubator is that when you have something that's working, there's a desire to invest all your resources, double down, triple down, and then everyone around you sort of wants to go work on that cool project. So what happened with the Hatch Labs is Hatch Labs basically folded into Tinder. Tinder spun out, became its own company, engulfed everything around it, and we basically got out of the incubator business when we found a success. So I think depending on how you do it, I think a good model for an incubator is sort of, we're gonna make a bunch of bets, but the second one takes off, we're gonna throw all of our weight against it and double down and triple down. Which could, it's a difficult thing to do, but I think that works versus diluting your focus across many things. Sometimes, many things that are working or that require a lot of people and resources, I think it gets very complicated because focus wins, right? Focus and passion wins.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Great question. Men swipe right more. They're less, men, from a sociological standpoint, men are less, they're less thoughtful when they're swiping on Tinder, but I think they're also less thoughtful in general when it comes to making a mate. Women are far more thoughtful, and they'll take the time to actually look at the bio, see who the person is. But that's changing on Tinder, ironically. So what we're seeing is the trend used to be that men would just swipe right, and then after they matched, they would look at the profile and they would sort of realize if they made a good decision swiping right after the fact. Whereas women take the time, and when they swipe right, there's a higher level of intent. That's changed over time because what happened was those men learned that swiping right actually becomes a nuisance because when you get all these matches and you only want, a few of them, now you have a shitty user experience. So that corrects over time. And then we did a lot to bring the information in the bio to the forefront. So now men are being more thoughtful when they're swiping as well. But men generally swipe right more than women, which matches sort of sociologically what you see is women in most societies are sort of the curators, and they're the ones that get to pick who they want to accept as a mate. But I think it's sort of somewhat human nature.
Men are pig. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. That's the one way to say.
There are people who are building bots to create funnels of of dating, and then actually creating an automatic reply and conversation. It's interesting to hear how you guys are dealing with it.
We've had everything from entire server farms designed and built to hack to basically put spam on Tinder. Every day we probably get, I think, about fluctuates between 300 to 500,000 fake account attempts, signups. These are attempts, we catch them right before they get through the doors, the majority of them, and then we'll catch the rest after. And then there's individual engineers who will build bots for their own use. So they'll build, there's actually some really powerful AI bot, there's some pretty crazy things that people have done or built algorithms to sort of optimize for finding the one. And we actually hired one who, we actually use a lot of, we use neural networking to sort of do our recommendations and everything. And one of these bots were just so fucking awesome that we hired the engineer.
That's
you have to come just work on our data sciences team.
That's awesome. One last question? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My name is Mark. I have a question. So I don't use Tinder. I'm married, not to say that married people don't use it. But I do like to meet people, and I spend a lot of time in airport lounges and at conferences and in restaurants when I'm traveling on the road on my own, and really for networking reasons. I'd love to meet new people, and I don't get to do as much as I would like to. I'm probably not going to install Tinder on my phone because I don't want some people seeing that I use it, because it's got a certain reputation. Yeah. Are you thinking of taking this elsewhere and making it more of an instant LinkedIn or something like that? Because it's a great platform, potentially with different users.
Totally. Societies, so matching people is very complex. Everything we know sort of in computer sciences is a one-directional problem, in that, like, I am looking for something, I'm searching, and then there's a set inventory that matches my criteria, but meeting people is like a bi-directional problem. Like, you're at a conference looking for X, Y, and Z, but then the question is, does that overlap with what the other person's looking for? And then are you guys a good match? So it is, there's the technical side of doing broader base matching, which we've been thinking a lot about, and then there's the user experience, and we're gonna do both. So I know you wanna use it that way. There's a lot of users who wanna use it that way, and there's a lot of users who wanna, you know, maybe they wanna meet someone at their temple, or maybe they wanna meet, you know, like the Jewish Federation. Recently, I'm friends with the person Jay Sanders, who runs the Jewish Federation in Los Angeles, and like they're trying to match Jews for not just for marriage, but also to like build better community, because sort of today those borders are you know, everything's blurring, and there's all different reasons that you want to meet someone, and we want all of them to exist on Tinder. We have a very unique way of doing it, and we're gonna launch something soon, relatively soon. What's that? Call it something else? Well, we haven't decided whether it would be a separate app or inside of Tinder. But what I think what would happen is our existing users would use it for dating and other things, and then that would trickle out and maybe change the persona of the brand, and then, so it might be a little longer before you can use it as a married person. But my hope is we can keep it all in one app. But if that's not plausible, we would create two apps.
All right, that was Sean Rad.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Ben.